Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Cradle News Roundup, coming to you now on a Thursday. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the news editor for the Cradle. As usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. Moving forward, to all of our faithful viewers, you can expect us to come out at least twice a week as we continue to try to expand this channel. Again, as usual, we remind you to like, to share, to subscribe, to check out our Patreon, where you can become a supporter of the Cradle, as we are attempting to move fully to become a fully reader-supported publication. So we want to ask you all to please go to our Patreon, check it out, and to let you know that hopefully soon enough we'll be monetizing our YouTube channel, so you can make donations right through here. If we haven't yet, it's because, as you can imagine, not everything is easy when you speak from this side of the aisle, so to speak. So with that being said, let's get on with today's program.
I just want to add that it's your donations, both viewers on YouTube and readers at the Cradle, that are making the second episode a week possible in the first place. And we do want to expand the format, either add new segments or launch an interview show where we would interview Cradle columnists and writers who are bringing us something new from the ground, or a new twist on existing events. So every one of your donations and becoming a patron especially really makes a difference here.
So please help us out so we can continue to do this. So let's start with Trump's visit to the Gulf. Obviously, he's there now as we record. He's headed to the UAE after visiting Saudi Arabia and Qatar, getting billions in investment pledges. 600 billion from Saudi Arabia, 200 billion from Qatar. They're going to buy a whole fleet of Boeing jets. Who knows how much money? We'll know by the time this episode airs. Our viewers will know how much he got the Emiratis to pledge. But most interestingly, he's meeting with Ahmad al-Shara, the self-appointed president of Syria. He met with him in the capital of Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. We'll see that clip in a moment, what Trump's thoughts were of this guy. But first, let's actually listen to what the director of national intelligence in the US, Tulsi Gabbard, said about Ahmad al-Shara just a few weeks ago.
I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
This is the Tulsi Gabbard I remember of the last decade. She was very clear. She was very marginalized from the U.S. Democratic Party, of which she was, I think, a vice chair during the Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, runoff, and left the party because she thought they scuttled Sanders' nomination. But then went to Syria and met with Assad and has had flack ever since. Why she should have flack for meeting a UN-recognized head of state versus Donald Trump meeting a UN-designated terrorist, okay, is beyond me. Now, Tulsi Gabbard has made it clear. She came back strong when she was up for nominations ahead of U.S. intelligence, and she said, those guys are al-Qaeda, those guys are extremists. This is what we're dealing with. And then if we could move to the clip of what Trump actually said about al-Shara.
Yeah. So let's keep in mind what Gabbard said, right? She described Shara as a man who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack. So now let's hear what Donald Trump has to say about the same guy.
How did you find the Syrian president?
Great. I think very good. Young, attractive guy, tough guy. Strong pass. Very strong pass fighter.
Does that worry you at all?
He's got a real shot at pulling it together. I spoke with President Erdogan, who I'm very friendly with him. He feels he's got a shot.
A young, attractive guy with a strong past as a fighter. What is this past exactly? All right, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Right?
And ISIS, deputy commander of ISIS.
Exactly. So this is what it has come to, right? 24 years after the United States launches the war on terror, millions of deaths later, so many countries destroyed, so many U.S. service members lost as well, right? And so many veterans of war, just for the U.S. president to come in and start drooling over this guy who's still, to this day, he's still designated by the U.S. as a global terrorist, right? They lifted the bounty off his head. They haven't removed him from the blacklist. Nevertheless, it is what it is. It should be interesting, right? And I think the comparison we're trying to reach at the end of the day here is what Tulsi Gabbard said is just a few weeks ago. It's not like this video we just played is like, from a few years. No, this is like from this year, just a couple of months ago. And now Donald Trump coming in and saying this. So, I know in particular you, Charmaine, have very many thoughts about this.
I mean, I think we should unpack this because at the same time as he was meeting with Shara, or before he was meeting with Shara, he declared that he would remove sanctions on Syria. Now, this is a guy who boasts about writing, the original Art of the Deal. What kind of negotiation is that? That you give your longtime enemy, Al Qaeda, what they want before you even meet with them, and they list your demands. In my view, Trump made that statement. Basically, he was bought off by the Saudis, the Qataris, and soon to be Emiratis. And there's a good argument to be made that, uh, I know Karim argues that the Gulf does whatever the U.S. says, but in this case, the Gulf is holding the purse strings. America's broke. Trump likes money. This is a unique historical opportunity in which the the coin is flipped, and the Gulf can actually buy a number of U.S. positions, perhaps on things that the U.S. doesn't care about that much. Trump doesn't care about Syria. He just doesn't. And perhaps he's been sold, the removal of sanctions will be a great opportunity for American companies, and mostly American companies, to sweep in there and take the lion's share of the business away from the Turks, maybe. Everyone is going to expect a piece of that pie, not just the Americans. Now, having announced the sanctions, of course, the Washington press corps and others went straight to administration officials to ask what this was about. And U.S. State Department regional spokesman, a guy called Michael Mitchell, explained that there are two types of sanctions. Okay, he spoke to I don't know, Sky Arabia, one of the Arabic media and Arabic language media, and he said, some of these sanctions are issued by executive order from the White House. Others are done by Congress. So he says that lifting them requires multiple legal and administrative procedures. So again, like the $1 trillion promised before, the $600 billion promised before from the Saudis, I kept saying, they may have promised it, doesn't mean a check has arrived, right? There's a process. It's like dangling this. And of course, Trump made his first trip to Saudi Arabia, correct? So we're seeing a little bit of a new change in power equations here. The Gulf has money, the U.S. doesn't. The Gulf wants to spend its money to get things in its favor, and the U.S. wants money to do things that are not as important to them. In this case, saying you remove sanctions from Syria could just be a flippant comment by Trump. Reuters is reporting that his comments about removing Syria sanctions has actually thrown his administration and members of the Department of Treasury, et cetera, into a bit of chaos.
Yeah. How do we do it? They don't know how to.
No, they hadn't even heard that this was a decision.
Yeah.
So it could have been just a flippant Trump comment showing intent to work on this rather than an executive order from the White House saying all White House related sanctions are removed and we're going to tackle Congress next. There's procedures to this. Their hands are going to be tied for a long time. Now, this guy, State Department regional spokesman, Michael Mitchell, goes on to say that, there are conditions ultimately that the U.S. has laid out, including human rights reports and violations that are unacceptable. The reports that the Shah-run government is failing to protect minorities, and those things are going to be it's not that they're going to be critical. The Trump administration in 1.0, his last administration, showed that he had no concern for human rights violations. It was not part of his policy making. In this case, though, there's an awful lot of scrutiny that's taking place. The Alawite killings on the coast, and then attacks on Druze in the south. And of course, Israel's now thrown into the mix. The possible normalization of Syria with Israel. I don't see how Ahmed al-Shara is going to do that. He has alienated a number of the jihadi factions who joined him to bring about the fall of the Assad government, who cannot believe, for starters, that this man has had the gall to bring his hijab-covered wife out in public. Like, that's such a no-no. They're still fixated on that, let alone the idea of normalizing with Israel. So Ahmed al-Shara has a lot of things, to balance out. But so does Trump. Trump making the statement doesn't mean it's a done deal. It's just very clear that the Qataris want this. And now the Saudis are sponsoring the Turkish and Qatari-backed, extremist in a fight that have been, backed by those two pro-Ikhwan players since 2011. Everybody wants to make sure Syria doesn't go into its opponent's hands. There's still a long game that will need to be played before we understand if sanctions will be dropped, where Syria will fall, whose sphere in which it falls, Turkey, Qatar, Saudi, UAE, France. France is vying heavily for access to the Syrian market and reconstruction, and the base and on the coastline, and of course the Americans. I don't know. Trump, I guess, still wants the oil, though he has removed some
I
soldiers.
mean, no,
It's very
yes.
unclear, Esteban. That's my point. It's really unclear, and I don't think we should jump immediately on Trump's statements to see these as a done deal. There will
Yeah.
be pushback.
Because the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights just today is reporting that the international coalition forces, U.S. occupation forces in northeast Syria, are continuing to decrease their presence in both Alomar and Konoko oil fields. They're removing their, they're essentially dismantling their bases. They have pledged to give them back to the Syrian state. Right now, Shara is getting it from all sides. Like, what are they to be the former founder of Al Qaeda in Syria, right? You're not just being called a young and attractive guy. You're also getting, deals from left and right. You're getting your oil back. The sanctions are being removed. Who knows how that's going to work?
And the
honestly.
IMF rushing, begging to give Syria
I mean,
money.
Syria has been so, they remove the sanctions, but then, the IMF and the World Bank come in, and at the end of the day, which one's going to be worse?
But do you hear the rhetoric also, Esteban? Like, these Western leaders and heads of Western organizations saying, we really have to do something to help the suffering of the Syrian people. They're the ones that made the Syrian people suffer by backing armed extremists and by applying sanctions totally across the state, across all sectors, knowing it would affect the economy, price of food, and basic supplies for the Syrian people.
It was very rich during Trump's speech. He says, Syria that has been sunk into debt and misery for the past decade. And he's like, who sunk Syria into debt and misery, right? Like, are we just skipping over that part? Karim, I want to hear from you, but before, I just want to mention something. Let's get into a bit more to the money, right, that Trump has offered. The $600 billion deal with Saudi Arabia, which includes a $142 billion arms deal, which Trump described as the biggest in history, although the details of the deal are not available, right? Today, Bloomberg comes out with this story that says there's really no information about what the deal entails, and it gives a very interesting piece of information that I saw also going around yesterday. The entire defense budget of Saudi Arabia this year was $72 billion. $142 billion is like double that. So it raises some questions. What do you think, Karim, about these deals? And I know also you want to mention the Air Force One jet that the Qataris have decked out for Trump.
Yeah, first, what we can see is that a repetitive scene of what happened in 2019 and 18 when Donald Trump visited these countries. I think we saw the same deals, the same spike of the purchase of military equipment from all these countries. And there's, as I say, that's their job and the way he went to these countries, you can feel as if their God came to visit them, and they will do whatever he wants. Yani, Qatar gave $400 million as a plane. Saudi Arabia gave like 600 billion, and I
In
don't think
pledges,
all
yeah.
yeah I don't think all of these equipments will go to Saudi Arabia. But the best way to pay for Americans is by purchasing weapons, even though they don't give them to you. And we saw this evidence in 2018 and 2019 when Ansarullah bombed different places in Riyadh, and we saw that the American air defense that was purchased by the United States, inflicted more damages than the Yemeni missiles. So that's my thoughts about the weapons that were purchased. And I just want to mention also the tragedy and the funny part of what happened is that Donald Trump, he's the one who implemented the Caesar Act on the Syrians, and they suffered because of him. And now they are thanking him, and as if I killed you and then revived you, and you tell me thank you. Uh, that's depressing for me to see Donald Trump's picture inside in Damascus and in the streets. And till now, it's confusing for me how everybody agreed on this guy. Everybody agreed. And usually the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia and Turkey and Qatar differs.
But not on
And
Sharia.
yeah, about Sharia, but everybody agreed on Sharia. Everybody wants to give him money. Everybody wants
He's just so young and
make him
attractive,
popular.
Karim. Come on.
Yeah, I know. He's taller than me. So these things are very weird. But of course, we have now an evidence, because many times I have argued with many people, and I think Sharmeen too, just to tell people that ISIS is funded and used by United States and the West and even Gulf countries. And now we have the evidence. This guy
Wait,
is
I've
ISIS.
argued against that. I've said no.
No, we had arguments with
Yeah.
people to convince them.
Yeah.
So now it's you can see the evidence. And the funny part also that the boss of Julani, who was al-Baghdadi, was killed also by Trump, and Trump went out in 2019 and said, "We killed him like a dog." Yeah, and yesterday they were shaking hands. That's so weird. That's so weird.
If you're an Iraq war veteran, or like a veteran of any of the past 20 years of wars from the U.S., how do you feel, right, seeing this? Do you think? I don't know.
If you're
If
in
I
the
would be very
U.S.
angry.
military or U.S. intelligence business and you're not like a politicized top leader, you're shocked at everything you spent 20-something years going after being just, nothing, worth nothing.
The war
All
on
the
terror.
American, troop lives lost, all the $2 trillion plus spent on a war on terror, all for nothing. But, for those of us who've been watching the region and who've understood American wars, they're never about bringing democracy. They're about bringing someone who'll basically be your lapdog into power. And the U.S. has played with um, takfiri extremists, killers, murderers, terrorists since the Afghanistan war. Okay. I mean, it's as clear as day. I mean, nobody has to question it. The Saudis in particular funnel the extremists to the CIA, who like wraps them up in some packaging and, and backs them and tries to have some kind of plausible deniability. But, as that sort of playbook has been played over and over and over again, it's become apparent to everybody, um, and why countries, US allies like Pakistan said, we're not going to play your war on terror anymore because it's done nothing but exacerbate terrorism and
Exactly.
our borders. It's what's happened to Iraq, it's what's happened to Syria, it's what's happened to Libya. It's happened in the Persian Gulf, it's happened on the African continent, um, so these are American backed terror outfits who then go in, destabilize a country, and allow an American-backed stooge to maybe come into power. And al-Shara showed himself so amenable to playing the lapdog role, right? The puppet role by donning a suit and tie. I mean, for sure,
Okay, the beard.
problems inside Syria now with the other Takfiri extremists because he sold his soul to the devil. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean the mid ranking, who form mid and lower ranking Takfiri extremists are not having, an absolute chip fit right now. And Shara doesn't have enough forces to keep Syria whole. I mean, I'm talking about because he's dissolved the Syrian army. He's going to have some real challenges domestically. I don't think this is going to shape up as much as Macron and Al Thani in Qatar and MBS in Saudi Arabia and MBZ in the UAE and whoever is calling the shots in the Trump administration think it will. I really don't, but we're going to wait and see.
Yeah, I just also want to say that lifting the sanctions on Syria is very good for the Syrian people, and even it's very good for Lebanon as a country because we are connected in many ways, including economy and various things. But also, putting or giving power to Sharia is also dangerous for Lebanon because now after he became the president, and now they are giving him power. Turkey is giving him Gulf, United States yesterday, and France 2 days ago. This will be very dangerous in Lebanon because now in Lebanon we have many people, we call them Islamist extremists. In Lebanon, they are in jails, and now many people are going and asking for them to go out, and these people did very bad things in Lebanon.
Yeah, and don't
So,
forget, Shara's administration attacked Lebanon several times,
yes.
even though the Israelis are occupying Syria South. So they will see, his administration will see um, the Lebanon as a like low-hanging fruit, a convenient punching bag. It is a smaller state, potentially a weaker state. I don't think there's anything higher on Shara's foreign policy agenda other than, raking in the cash, than because he's a Takfiri going after Iran and Hezbollah, right? Which absolutely suits the Gulf and the West and Turkey very, very well. But that's not a policy for a country, So, having Shara in there, the former head of Al Qaeda, is not good for the region, not good for the region at all. It's not good for Syrians long term. It's not good for the minorities. And for sure, we're looking at a breakup of Syria because he just simply doesn't have the means to control all of the country, especially when he's actually opened the door to so much overt foreign interference in his country.
One
And
last
also,
thing before we move on to the other, what's happening with Trump in the Gulf. Shara, we mentioned this in the last episode that he's not going to Baghdad, right? And I just want to throw something in because the justification given by Damascus is that he received threats. He was, they're concerned for his security in Baghdad because, all of the a big chunk of the Iraqi government, of the Iraqi parliament, is saying if that guy comes here, you need to arrest him because, founder of Al Qaeda in Syria.
You know how Sudani, the Iraqi
Prime Minister.
minister, even while protests were going on about Shara coming, very overtly, with no seeming concern whatsoever, announced that Ahmed al-Shara would be invited to Iraq. I remember thinking, he's not dumb, okay? Ahmed al-Shara is a Takfiri. He wants to kill Shia. This is what he did, okay, for a good decade and a half.
For a big chunk of his life.
Or, yeah, a big chunk of his life. And I was thinking, the one way out of this for Sudani is to make the invitation, placate the Arab countries that allowed Baghdad to host the Arab summit, right? Say, oh, I invited him. And then seed threats against Shara, right? In certain circles and in the media, and so that Shara would not come. And I think that, in fact, is what's happened.
also,
Maybe,
I
yeah.
wanted to say regarding the Arab summit, also the Lebanese president is not going, and he said there's nothing new in this summit.
The president from where?
Lebanese president Joseph Aoun,
Yeah.
although we can say that the country that gave most to Lebanon and still doing is Iraq. They gave us free fuel, free food when we had the all the bad things that happened to Lebanon between 2020 and 2019 and 2020. Iraq was always there, and now he doesn't care about Iraq.
Do you think Joseph Owen actually sees himself as an Arab? I mean, that's maybe where this
Not so much.
question starts, you know?
if-
I mean, I think he sees himself as above
I don't
the
know if you can
Arabs
say
and-
Arab. He sees himself as a Franco Gulf person.
Yeah.
يعني,
He doesn't have to deal with all the other riffraff, right?
no, we have
All the other Arab riffraff.
UAE, Saudi Arabia, and France, and that's what they say. He's better than the Americans. Americans only see the American map. He sees these three maps. So I want also to mention the humiliation that Trump said before going there. I think it's very important also.
We have video of that too, right?
We have video of that. We can play it.
So I think it's a great gesture from Qatar. I appreciate it very much. I would never be one to turn down that kind of an offer. I mean, I could be a stupid person, say, no, we don't want a free, very expensive airplane. And I think it was a gesture because of the fact that we have helped all of those countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and others. We keep them safe. If it wasn't for us, they probably wouldn't exist right now.
And imagine you're going to collect maybe trillions of dollars from countries, and before going there, you tell them, if we don't protect you, you won't exist. And I said it before, Trump maybe can do whatever he thinks he can, or he can't accomplish his thoughts in many places except in our region, unfortunately, because they will do whatever he wants. And for instance, the Canadian Prime Minister stood against him. The Mexicans stood against him. Even Greenland, with a population of like 400,000 people or 500 people, they mocked him. But what happens when he come to our region? You humiliate three countries, and each country give you
more money than the next.
From $600 billion to $1 trillion, and this is absurd for me. It's really make them look bad. And also I watched his speech, and the funny thing is that his speech was like as if he's still in the elections. Of course, most of his speech was against Biden and what Biden did. And the funny part in his speech, he said that I named the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, and Saudis stood up and clapped for him. This is so weird for me.
The face
That's
of
so weird.
the face of MBS during that speech, man. You know,
Yeah, I know.
you not often see that much love
Yeah, I know.
in
I
somebody's
told you,
eyes.
as if your God is praising you. Tell me your feeling. It's the same.
Exactly.
I remember once, and this was well after Margaret Thatcher had left Downing Street. It was at a conference, a Gulf conference in London, and she was the keynote speaker. I'm sure they'd all flock there to see the great Margaret Thatcher. And the way she spoke, guys, was like, you're so lucky to be here in the heart of global finance. And what England has done for you people is extraordinary, right? Sort of
For the
the
savages.
British mandates and colonial Britain, okay, choosing their leaders for them and carving out borders viciously in the Persian Gulf. And I swear to God, every single one of those guys in shiny double-breasted suits in the audience were grinning like she throwed them like little diamonds. I mean, just grinning. And it's very hard for me to watch. I mean, that was the most stunning thing for me, because I don't think they even realize how humiliating that language is. But look how much people in the Gulf have internalized the Western narrative, that they even see themselves as, we'll take the crumbs, right? They're in a position of power. And I think the people at the top, like Mohammed bin Zayed, Mohammed bin Salman, the Al Thanis, they understand that their money is going a lot further these days to getting what they want from empire than it used to be. But the masses are just adoring, and it's very frustrating to watch this.
Yeah, I also wanted to add something that was also, يعني, as you said, it made you uncomfortable. He also in his speech mentioned that the worst day in Middle East history is 7 October, and you can see the Saudis nudging their heads, and some are clapping. Yani, he should say Nakba, he should say Naksa, he should say the war in Yemen,
The
the
Iraq war.
poverty, their Iraq war. He should stand and apologize for Arabs. That's why we are like this. I think they don't even know
The
the right from the
slavishness.
bad. They
No,
don't
they
know
don't.
the right
Well,
from the
just
bad. It's
I can't take their bubble seriously. By the way,
the
who
Gulf
made
of
the comment? One of
Mexico
you about how
into the Gulf
they
of
were applauding
America. That
his
was very
changing the
popular,
Gulf of
other than
Mexico
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Gulf of
with
Karim.
Mexico.
America. I think is it probably they were applauding because of the likelihood of his recognition of changing the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Gulf. Of course, that matters not a whit internationally, because at the United Nations and all international institutions, cartographers, etc., will continue to call it the Persian Gulf, because Iran happens to be the littoral state that has the longest border on that Gulf.
On the Gulf.
Longer than all the Arab countries on the Gulf combined. Now, I would like to mention that on Trump's comments about changing Persian Gulf to Arabian Gulf, he already seems to have backtracked on it.
Before the trip, he did.
But,
Before
but,
the
but,
trip, he did,
but do we
yes.
know that it
Yeah.
was true? It was on the table?
It was on the table before the trip, and then like once the next round of the Iran talks were confirmed, essentially he
Yeah.
backed down and was
And
like, maybe not.
I was just reading something today that the Iranians had said, don't even come to us if you're going to do something ridiculous like that. We're not
Exactly.
going to tolerate it. And so it wasn't worth it for him. Trump is so transactional, and depending what offer comes by him, he's going to change minute to minute, which is why removal of Syria sanctions, it's not going to be as easy a job. Getting $1 trillion or $2 trillion from the Gulf, well, maybe before he's in the grave. There's a
But Sharmi-
lot that happens in the interim.
But Sharmin, Trump saying it, this means now, for instance, UAE, companies from UAE and Saudi Arabia can go to Syria and work without being asked, as he started to travel before the United States dropped that $10 million bounty. You know what I mean? And maybe it will take time for United States companies to come to Syria, but
I mean,
the effect will be instant among Gulf countries.
let's be honest. Okay, first of all, I don't know that it's that simple. Secondly, Gulf countries have been doing whatever they want in Syria for a very, very long time, even while the government of Bashar al-Assad was there. The French, remember, they got sued for something like $200 million, and lost Lafarge, their company, their cement company, was doing business with ISIS. Okay,
And
in
they
the
paid
middle of
for
the
the
Syrian
United
war.
States, not for Syria.
Yeah. Can you imagine? So the Syrian
Wow.
government didn't file this case. Very stupid of them. Lawfare, very, very easy way to win in certain jurisdictions. The U.S. filed a suit against this French company Lafarge and won $200 million. Nothing to do with the U.S. whatsoever. However, the French have been doing business in there. Everyone's been doing business in there. Let's make that clear. I don't know what's going to come. I mean, by the way, didn't al-Shara offer to build Trump towers in Syria in advance of his
Yes.
meeting with? I mean, everybody figures the way to this man's heart, okay, this powerful man's heart, is money and ego
McDonald's.
and
Yeah,
glory.
At McDonald's.
Yeah, whatever. And so, I mean, isn't Trump so easy to play? I don't know. I mean, obviously for everybody except Netanyahu. Netanyahu's hit a snag.
And
Even the
Zelensky.
Iranians are doing well. Like, Trump is now praising them, calling them super intelligent, right? He called their, in the last talks, like, they're very intelligent people, which confirms what we know about Iranian negotiation style, for thousands of years. But that's also an interesting thing to get to, because when Trump went to the Gulf, he tried to convince Gulf countries to jump on his anti-Iran bandwagon and didn't get a positive response. Now, not to say that Gulf countries, um, very sectarian in their outlook because of the way we can see how they've played in this region over the last 2 decades or more. Um, they they're very focused on economic growth and progress. And so war is, has very unpredictable, outcomes. They don't want the destabilization. The price of oil is nice and high. They're making good money. They all have visions for their own countries. So they would like Iran neutered in some way, but not
Yeah.
at the risk of, a massive regional conflagration. So Trump did not get the positive response he wanted on that. And let's not forget Trump's trip to the Persian Gulf was preceded by Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi's trip to the
Also trip to
Persian
the
Gulf.
Persian Gulf.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
reminding them that we're your neighbor. We've worked really hard to solidify relations, at least make them, cordial and increase business trade, etc. Do you really want this?
I mean, we know that war is a profitable business, except when it's at your borders, right? So we're like the
Yeah.
Gulf countries are happy
Well,
just promoting unrest in Africa, but like let's keep it away
and I think the
from our
Gulf
region.
I think the Gulf countries would rather throw those billions to Trump to stop war than have to expend billions on, being dragged into a war in one of the
Yeah.
world's biggest shipping, oil and gas shipping lanes.
Yeah, by the way, one third of his speech in Saudi Arabia was against Iran, and he said many weird things. This also may be applied on Al Shari or Al Julani. I don't
Yeah.
think he was really briefed who is this guy is, to be honest, because what he said during his speech is I was like this. First, he said that Iran was all green, and when the revolution came, now it's a desert. And he said that every now and then he hears that buildings are falling down in Iran
Yeah, yeah,
and there is no
whatever. Yeah.
infrastructure. And he also said something that's very weird, that all the infrastructure and big buildings in Iran are post 1979, and now they don't know how to build. This man, and it's written, it's not from his mind. He
Yeah.
was reading.
The leader of the
So
free world.
I don't
Those
know.
guys have been to Iran. The people he's talking to, they know it's not the case. Doesn't matter. They're just, kissing his ass. Get this
Yeah,
trip
but I
trip
feel he
over with.
believes it.
Get the
You
things
know
he
what
wants.
I
Yeah,
mean?
of course.
It really doesn't matter. Somebody, please, guys, send mass emails to the White House with videos of Iran and what it looks like now.
It's also very, and I don't know, I don't want to get always negative, and people are attacking me on comments, but
It's
I
your
want to
brand. It's
say
your
it.
brand.
It's all frustrating that after all these billions or trillions of dollars, and the Gulf countries only asked Trump to lift sanctions of Syria, which is good, and to meet Sharia, who's a criminal, to be honest. And they didn't mention Gaza.
Very true.
That's also, I think they didn't
That
even
tells you
care or
everything.
ask him about Gaza.
Well, no,
They don't give a crap.
let's be clear. I think Trump went there knowing he's not going to get Saudi normalization.
But he spoke
Well,
about it though.
No,
in
he
his
spoke
speech.
about it. He said it will happen, Sharmin. He said Biden
That's
did a
his
big
dream.
mistake, and after in my term, Saudi
Guys,
Arabia will be in.
You're quoting Trump as though what he says is a final word on anything. Number
for the
one,
Saudis, it might be
let's
like this.
no, listen. Let's break this down. The Saudis during the Biden administration only contemplated normalization, even back then, before October 7th. Okay, they only contemplated normalization of their Palestinian statehood. They've not veered from that line. Subsequently, Trump knew in advance of his trip, well in advance of his trip to the Persian Gulf, that was not going to be, that it was not going to happen. He didn't go there to announce this. He went there to get money. Okay. Also, keep in mind that in the last few weeks, we've heard that the Americans are okay with decoupling normalization from their support for a Saudi nuclear program, which means they want to get on with the business side of things, knowing that normalization is not in the future. Now, the Saudis aren't not normalizing with Israel because they care about Gaza or Palestinians. They're doing that because it's just unpalatable for the Muslim masses for them to do so. Simply that. Trump knows he's not going to get it. They've given up on that normalization. They're talking about normalization with other countries. He thinks he's going to get normalization with Syria. I think Ahmed al-Shara will be killed the next day if he does that. Look,
I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you.
Now I don't think so, because
Yeah.
France wants him.
No. I'm not talking
Saudi
about that.
Arabia,
I'm
the
talking
Gulf,
about,
Turkey.
I'm talking about the mid-level jihadis, takfiris in his group that,
He started to arrest them yesterday, Sharmin.
correct. But
Yeah,
if
he did a
some-
purge, remember, in Idlib a few months ago? He purged like a
And
lot of
yesterday
people.
also.
he can't purge them all. There is a massive number of these people who are criticizing Julani now. We hear it all over their social media, okay, and privately as well. All I'm saying is all the balls are still in the air.
That's
I
true,
don't think
yes.
Trump is
Sharmeen?
expecting normalization. If he thinks he's going to get normalization with Lebanon, really, that guy should just retire right now, because no matter how far Joseph Aoun has lodged up the Trump's considerable ass, and Trump thinks, oh, he's got this new in-law, Lebanese in-law who can get him in with that. It's just not going to happen. Half the population here is pro-Hezbollah, pro-resistance in particular, okay? Christian, Sunni, Shia, Druze, you name it, okay? Not going to happen here. So I think normalization right now is off the table. I think Trump also sees that the only way toward advancing normalization is to give that impression of Palestinian statehood being possible, which really means to enforce a ceasefire on Israel's attacks on Gaza. And that means a fight with the Israelis. But, in his world of, wanting glory and money, which side wins here? I mean,
Money.
I kind of think so. Not the Zionist lobby. Trump has a history of shrugging off anyone who doesn't agree with him, and then even becoming adversarial towards them. And we're seeing the MAGA crowd also switch on Israel. Okay, slowly but surely, and Trump doesn't like being called a chump as well, for Netanyahu's chump.
And Sharmin, don't you think it's weird, because we never agreed with Israel, but currently the only people that don't want Sharia are the axis of resistance and Israel?
No. See, I disagree with you there. I think no way, no how would Trump be able to remove sanctions on Syria, which is like a nothing burger country to him, okay, a shithole. It's just something that his various friends want. But no way, no how would the Zionist lobby allow this if they actually thought Sharia was a threat to them. I implore you to go back to things we've written at the Cradle, things I've written in the past, showing a direct linkage between Israel funding Al-Nusra, okay, which is the precursor to Shara's HTS. Direct funding of this group. Whatever theater the Israelis are playing, I mean, look, they want to invade Syria, and they're doing it under the pretext of protecting minorities. Same reason France is doing this, under the pretext of protecting minorities. Please read our article today. It is about France and al-Shara and France's bullshit excuses for getting in on the Syrian game early and establishing a presence there and doing business there with these terrorists. These guys are using minorities to create these pretexts. Israel is okay with al-Shara for the time being. Absolutely okay with him. Trump would not have made those offerings without this.
Completely.
Okay, I don't see that till now, because all their politicians, all their writers, even various people in Israel that I follow without them knowing that I follow them, they are saying that they don't want Sharia, and
Yes,
they are
but,
bombing. And
they also say that the fact that they're not getting the captives is hurting Israeli democracy, right? Or they say they say these things. They talked about this.
I know, but they are acting against him also. We'll see.
We'll see
How are they acting against him? How?
They bombed next to his palace. They bombed 3 days ago. They
If they
bombed
wanted
Israeli
to
army.
hit
from
him, Karim, if they
Yes.
wanted to hit Shara, they would have killed him. They're killing leaders left, right, and center in this region, that was just
They
theater.
like him. They like him. So
He's
I,
their
But all,
goon.
but all,
If
yes.
this guy's put on a suit and tie for the West, okay, and is absolutely, putting lipstick on a pig, he is adapted to that lipstick like nobody's business. He's on
But they
side.
can't kill Sharia, Sharmeen.
Oh
If
my
I am an
goodness.
Israeli, I can kill Sayyid Hassan, but I can't kill Sharia because Sharia will create problems in the, between Israel and the Gulf countries,
The
and
Gulf
between
doesn't care.
Israel and
Qatar might
Turkey.
care. Qatar might care. Israel doesn't like Qatar because it does its own thing, too much of the time for their liking. So I mean, I don't buy that, but situations change and we'll see. I think like the Americans have taken out Al Qaeda leaders very selectively, okay? People who are maybe true to the Takfiri global jihad cause versus those who will put on lipstick and act like they're pig. This is how they're playing in the region. Julani ultimately is expendable if he doesn't do what they want. But right now, he's literally out with a cup begging, and doing a little jig
he's the
for
belle of the
for his new
ball.
masters. Yeah.
He's the belle of the
He's the
ball
belle of the
right now.
ball. He's the
Right
belle of the
now
ball.
at this
Yeah.
moment.
Begging for what? For his safety.
No, for money. He wants to transform Syria into something completely different. He's willing to break up the country. He doesn't care.
So you think Sharia is really want to improve Syria? He will be a
I'm
real
sorry, did
president.
I say where did I say that?
That's why I asked you.
I'm saying Shada likes power. He wants to be in power.
Okay.
He wants to be in Damascus. He wants to be in the palace.
He likes the suits, he likes the beers, he likes the red
I don't
carpet.
understand. Like how many
Eh,
other corrupt leaders in the world have not,
So
marched that same path in the past?
I think before we finish for today, let's discuss what happened this morning, right? A couple of interesting things, and let's stay with the whole Trump, West Asia tour. He's in UAE. He's already landed. Earlier today, he said that Gaza should be turned into, what was the term that he used? He said a freedom zone. Let's turn Gaza into a freedom zone. So a repeat of the Riviera thing. The NGO that we were discussing on Monday is supposed to start operations at the end of the month. So we know, right, that the forced displacement is coming. Just this morning, today, from dawn, 115 Palestinians at least were killed in Gaza. So we know that the situation over there is just as bad, if not worse, than it was before. And the Iranian nuclear deal, which we already discussed. According to reports, Steve Witkoff handed Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, a written plan, a written proposal for the nuclear deal. What Trump seems to be trying to do, right, and I think this was kind of like already announced in a way, is at the end of this tour, he wants to have like everything done, right? Like the deals with Saudi Arabia, Gaza ceasefire, Iran nuclear deal. Even Zelensky was in Turkey today, right? They were
Yeah,
supposed to
let's not
have
forget Russia, Ukraine going on right today at the same time.
and they sat them out. They like the Russians didn't send anyone. They sent, I think, like a second, third level officials to meet with them. So do you think that at the end of this tour, right, and one last thing, Donald Trump still not scheduled to go to Israel as of the moment we're recording this, still not scheduled to go. It would be a very interesting development if he actually, just returns to Washington without stopping in Israel, and gonna cause a lot of headaches, I would imagine. Do you guys
Well,
think that Trump is gonna achieve all of these things, most of these things, none of these things?
here's the sad thing. He actually can. He actually can. This has always been the case with any US president that was willing to look past big corporate pressure, big lobby pressure, et cetera, and just, get something done. He came in on a platform of getting these things done. He has the opportunity. I think he screwed up in the first 2 months a bit and would like to get back on track and focus on other issues. He's tried to secure a China win in this week, right? That both have mutually decided to cut tariffs by 100 and something percent. So I think he wants to now sort of muzzle the furor and chaos he let out of the bag in the last month internationally. And he can do it. He can do it. Will he stick to it? I don't know. Let's not forget that Steve Witkoff was in Israel with a few senior members of his team. We don't know doing what exactly. I imagine trying to placate or sort of, troubleshoot the troubled US or rather Trump Netanyahu relationship. So actually, we don't know if he's been successful in that and whether Trump will just turn around from the UAE and fly into Tel Aviv or not. We'll see. For sure, he's trying to get all his ducks in the row to have some major foreign policy boom, boom, boom wins. And that's what anyone would do in his position. He has the ability to do it. We'll see. Every podcast always surprises us, doesn't it, guys?
Something surprising.
We
Something
just
surprising
don't know what's coming up.
Okay, I don't know, Karim. Do you have something to add to the Iran deal, to the Gaza ceasefire?
I want to
etc.?
add the most important thing. I want people to like, share, and
To subscribe and share. Yes, that is the most important thing. You know what? Before we go, actually, one last thing I wanted to mention, really, because this whole summit, right, the West Asia tour of Trump, is happening at the same time as China was hosting Latin American nations, from the CELAC, from the Caribbean and Latin American states. And Colombia signs on to the Belt and Road Initiative. China is talking about, defending sovereignty and helping with progress and helping with this and helping with that. Very, different situations, right? We really went into this stuff with the Arabs and the Gulf leaders and the monarchs, just like basking in the glory of Donald Trump. And at the same time, you have China making these moves, right? Continuing to kind of like playing chess while the US is playing, I don't even know if we can say checkers.
And not only that, Esteban, yesterday, UN envoy of China, they used strong vocabulary against Israel to end its war in Gaza. And also Russia yesterday, they started using Russian credit cards in Iran. Also, I think this is very important.
They activated NFC
The mirror
payments.
card,
Yeah.
yeah.
This is things are changing, except here.
Except in Lebanon.
No, you know what? To be honest, because these countries leaders are working to their countries on the long range. Here
Yeah.
in Lebanon, and other places, these people are not even elected; they are appointed in these positions to serve other countries, and that's why we are still
Yes.
in our places.
Yes, I agree with you completely. Not just in Lebanon, I feel like in other places you have the same. Look at Ibrahim Traoré, right? When he was in the Victory Day, like himself doing a victory lap, kind of, right? And this week there was this report that over the past year since they took power, he took power in Burkina Faso, that the country got like $18 billion from their gold mines, as opposed to $1 billion that they used to get when the French were in control of this. So this wave is happening, right? This tidal wave is happening, and there's countries like your Burkina Faso, your Colombias, your Iran to some extent, that are making that shift, that are being like, hey, like the future is not in the West, the future is in the East, and we need to consolidate those
Even
alliances.
Serbia and Hungary.
Yeah, and then you have the other countries, the Lebanons, the Ecuadors, the et cetera, who are like, no, we're happy with the crumbs. We like the
And
crumbs.
you have the
That's
most
what we
weird
want.
things. You have the most weird things like the Gulf countries that they have everything and still they push for
Yeah, but they
for
want
the
to
Western
be.
agenda, which
They
is
want to be
against them.
Westerners. They want to be Westerners deep down.
Yeah, they want to. Pushing Western agenda made them go to war against Yemen. And who said we will see missiles in Riyadh? But they didn't know how to act. They didn't see that this war is a Western war. So
Well, all I
that's it.
can say is, if you have questions about any of these things we've just been discussing in the last few minutes, read the Cradle, because that's our niche. Geopolitics of West Asia, but from a Eurasian perspective as opposed to Atlantis' perspective. And that's where everything's happening in the world right now. So if you want to get deep into the weeds on what's happening in this region and into Asia, why new land routes, rail routes, waterway routes, pipelines matter, why the exchange of trading in new currencies matters. It's our niche.
Yeah.
And I'm actually so grateful for that. Honestly, I mean, as a consumer of news myself, I'm so grateful for the Cradle, I read the articles, the features from our, you know, amazing authors around the world and our news, because where else am I going to go get this kind of perspective? I'm
Exactly.
not saying that to toot our horn. I genuinely
See,
mean it.
see, and
When I hear anything, I quickly go to Cradle social media and quickly
Yeah.
go to our news section. You know.
No, for
see,
sure,
and
for sure.
Arabia is good, Sharmir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sky News.
Whatever.
Sky News and BBC. There's no bias there. So with that being said, make sure to check us out on social media, on Telegram, on X. We follow every new development. If there's any viewers out there, make sure to follow us and make sure to subscribe to our channel to check out, previous podcast episodes. You'll see, that more often than not, we end up kind of predicting what's going to happen, even if we don't set out to do it. But thankfully, we have this perspective that allows us to see the changing, right? The changes that are happening. In any case,
there's no crystal ball here. It's because we're covering West Asia from an Asian perspective. We see all the little balls in play that are not mentioned, in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, FT, et cetera. They're just simply not.
And if they are, it's usually like 1 or 2 years after, right? I've seen FT headlines, I've seen like New York Times headlines that this year that read like something we wrote in the Cradle like 3 years ago,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to be ahead of the
100%.
curve, tell your family, tell your friends, follow us on our channels. We want to thank you all for joining us this week. Moving forward, expect the podcast to come out on Mondays and Thursdays. Make sure to always, leave a like, to share, to subscribe. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.